Hello. Aristotle provided an observation that's been well understood over the centuries, that the most effective form of argument is the one that the audience is allowed to think that it has worked out for itself. After all, this is the foundation for the potency of parables, whereby the listener is required to draw the lesson from the story as opposed to having the lesson imposed on them. To achieve this, there's the need for thinking it through, cognitive processing essentially, and this results in the thought emerging as that of the respondent in the way that Aristotle described. A more immediate example are these two ways of preventing people from sitting on antique chairs. On the first chair, there's what can appear a slightly imperious injunction, reminiscent of instructions by teachers, and this isn't really sweetened that much by the insertion of please. On the other, from a castle in Wales, there's just this holly leaf. This is simple and immediate, but requires some thinking to arrive at the message. But the thought emerges into the conscious, and so can be felt to be that of the viewer, rather than the imposition of the injunction in the sign. Also, the emergence of this thought as a simple solution can even have a kind of pleasurable effect. It's sort of like a cognitive truffle. This was commented on by the mathematician Poincaré, who suggested that insight, of which the holly leaf in this instance is a trigger, is a real aesthetic feeling that all true mathematicians recognise, and was capable of eliciting aesthetic emotion. I mean, such pleasure might be deemed as a sort of binding agent for the thought, helping to further anchor it as one's own. In another area, Claudia Muth, a researcher, commenting on an experiment with people interpreting modern art, observed that the creation of meaning is what's rewarding. She felt that people like a challenge if they feel they can solve it. She called this moment, when they arrived at the solution from disfluency to fluency, she termed the aesthetic aha. I mean, this is also one of the essential elements of cinema, which was recognised early on and is called the Kuleshov effect. Alfred Hitchcock spoke at some length about it. This involved the belief that meaning can be derived through juxtaposition, and it is left to our brains to do the work when two things, which can be totally unrelated, are brought together, processed by the individual when confronted with the holly leaf. The thought resulting from this is one made by the person, and so becomes intrinsic to him or her rather than extrinsic. As such, it's like the endowment effect of behavioural economics, whereby an item is invested with greater value if it belongs to you. An example of this is an owner of a coffee mug which actually costs $5, but won't give it up for less than $12 because he feels it's worth more to him because it's his possession. In terms of the thought emerging as the respondent's own, neural studies show that self-relevance induces a lot more neural activity in the reward system. And this becomes evident on an fMRI scan when the subject at issue is related directly to the individual. There's a lot more activity. As the thought has become the receiver's own, then it has greater self-relevance, and so following on from the term used in behavioural economics, it seems appropriate to call this process the cognitive endowment effect. At a more mundane level, there's the example of Betty Crocker. This was an instant cake mix to which only water needed to be added. But when it was launched on the market, it flopped. Ernest Dichter, a well-known psychologist, suggested that the recipe should call for the addition of an egg by the housewife. I mean, this was unnecessary, but transformed the cake into her creation. Success was immediate. In the same way, thinking through something in terms of cognitive processing makes the thought the consumer's own. I recognise that all this is hardly a great revelation. The powerful tool presented by cognitive processing has always been a significant element in communication. But hopefully it succeeded in articulating more clearly how this tool can work and how it can aid effective communications when it's realised that it's not just the telling of a story which counts, but that the greater potency is provided by making the thought the possession of the audience. Thank you.